All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We do not have a quorum, but we will be going over the agenda items. Dave, would you like to go ahead and kick us off?
Yes, sure, certainly. Good morning, everybody. We'll be going over the financial results for the month of January and also have an update on where we expect to be by the end of the year. I'm going to share my screen. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Thank you for the thank you for the confirmation. Okay, so for the month of January, the authority spent just under $1.1 million. Of that amount, $389,000 was for our claims and benefit system. That was mostly for the appeals administration system. We will be getting $135,000 of that back from DOL, so that we only pay our portion of that, which is $450,000 in total. Our salaries for the month, salaries, benefits, and taxes, were $388,000. $125,000 was spent for our contact center, $75,000 for some annual licenses related to our employee contribution system. $49,000 was spent on some development work to update and improve and refine the employee contribution system. And $33,000 was spent on our continued outreach efforts. Cumulatively to date, the authority has spent just about $21 million, $7.9 million in the current fiscal year. We are cumulatively ahead of budget in expenditures by over $18 million. And of that, almost $21 million, $8.3 million has been spent on the employee contribution system, about $4.7 million on salaries, benefits, and taxes, $2.1 million on the claims and benefits system, including the appeals system with DOL, almost $2 million for our support teams, $1.7 million for post-production support, and $640,000 on our outreach efforts. Focusing on our bond money for a minute, in January, we spent $22,000 for some temporary professional fees for work on the benefit claim system, and $231 for the appeals administration for our portion of the appeals admin system that DOL developed and has up and running. So to date through January, we have spent just under $10.5 million of bond money. We do have another $609,000 for items that we know we're going to pay or that we have earmarked for further work for the appeals administration system. So after all that, we expect to have $1.1 million of bond money left for future potential use that's already been allocated and made available to the authority. Focusing on the contribution activity. Sorry if my screen's jumping around a little bit. For our contribution activity for the month of January, fourth quarter contributions were due at the end of January. So that's when most of the contributions come in, and we got almost $92.8 million of contributions in the month of January. For the fourth quarter, the contributions were $95 million. So as is the trend, most of the contributions come in the last month. Also in the month of January, we began making benefit payments. $1.3 million of those were made. We also made our monthly payment to AFLAC for the administration of the benefit work. That was $1.9 million. Paid our quarterly administration fee at budget, which was $4.2 million, and made our monthly regularly scheduled repayment of seed funds. And so after all that, the fund has over $353.5 million in it. To date, the contribution activity, I apologize, my screen apparently doesn't like the ice and snow this morning, so it doesn't like the cold apparently. The activity for the contribution activity cumulatively to date is over $394 million through January. And as of a couple of days ago, that number did go up somewhat to $395.2 million. To date, claims and benefit payments, including the $20 million payment that we made into the impressed account as a deposit, is $21.3 million. So $20 million as a deposit and $1.3 million of benefit payments through January. As an update, through this week, benefit payments are now at $12.8 million, going up regularly. We are monitoring that closely. It's still early in the game to see how that trends out, but the payments are being made. And it's too early to say what the run rate of that is going to be, but we're at 12.8 so far. And like I said, we have $353.5 million in the fund available. So as far as where we expect to be in terms of our operating budget by the end of the year, our operating budget was at $15.1 million, and we expect to be at $13.6 million. That's pretty much where we said we would be the month before, so we'll be $1.4 million ahead of budget. There really wasn't much movement compared to last time. Salaries, benefits, and taxes are expected to be lower because we don't have we won't be needing a separate chief operating officer position, so that went down. That decrease was somewhat offset by an increase in vendor support with Slalom for ongoing maintenance of the employee contribution system based on their latest estimate from us. But even though it did increase, it's still well within the amount that we expect to spend with them as per our statement of work with them. So we're definitely in budget with that. And in terms of where we expect to be for our contributions by the end of the fiscal year, June 30th, 2022, we expect to be at $227.8 million. That is somewhat lower by about $5 million than we said last time. Our payroll contribution activity came in a little less than we had expected. Like I said, we do look at that, and we will be working with our actuaries to make sure that everything that we're trending where we should be. I will point out that for this projection that our claims and benefit payments, we still have expected to be at $250.5 million per our latest actuarial assumptions, even though the benefit payments now are less than what we budgeted or what the actuary said we would be. It is somewhat of a lagging indicator because we do see the amount going up every month, and we're working with AFLAC to make sure that everything's coming in and timely. And like I said, it's still early in the game to see what the regular trend would be. So once all the dust settles and we see what the regular trend is, we can adjust this number once we have a decent amount of regular actual activity. But for now, we're going to leave it at that number. That's my summary for where we are. as of January, and actually some updated numbers where we are right now. Does anybody have any questions?
Good. Amber?
Dave, and Freya, just wanted to let you know that Mike and John have joined us and we now have a quorum. Daryl has graciously agreed to chair the meeting, so we would like to regroup to the minutes so that we can approve the minutes.
Okay, yeah, I think Daryl had already determined that he was going to do that, so that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, and good morning, John and Mike. I didn't see you while I was
Morning,
presenting.
Dave.
Hello, thank you for joining us.
Good morning. I think before we leave Dave's presentation, Dave, can you just recap the actual payments for disbursement? Was it 21? You said 21.8 million?
I'm sorry, you're talking since for our for operations from inception to date? Is that
Well,
what
you gave a figure for the month of January, then you gave an update beyond that.
Oh, for benefit payments?
Yes.
Right.
Oh, okay. So for benefit payments since inception, it's been through January, it's been $21.3 million. $20 million of that was for the deposit into the imprest account so AFLAC could fund. Another $1.3 million of that was benefit payments that were made in the month of January. Through this week, our benefit payments have been $12.8 million. So if you take the 12.8 and you want and add the $20 million in the imprest account, we've laid out $32.8 million so far. But the actual benefit payments to date have been $12.8 million.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome, Daryl.
Okay. Again, welcome everyone. This is our Finance and Audit Committee meeting with the Connecticut paid leave. Today is Friday, February 25th. And I would just like to have Amber conduct a roll call.
Thank you, Daryl. Bill Jasinski,
Present?
Adrian Cochran,
Present.
John Scott,
Here.
Mike Soltis,
Here.
Alex and Paul are not with us today. Thank you, we have a quorum.
Excellent. And acknowledging any, excuse me, any members from the public? Okay, so we had the next is the review and approval of the January 28th meeting minutes. Any corrections, questions, comments?
Motion to approve. Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Against?
Aye.
Okay, it passes. Thank you. And David, you provided our budget review. I'll just ask for Mike, John, anyone would like a quick recap if you weren't able to hear the presentation.
I'm good.
Michael?
I'm sorry, Daryl, I didn't hear you.
So, yes, sir. Would you like a recap? I'm not sure if you were able to hear the presentation from David.
I heard most of it, so no need for a recap.
All right, wonderful. Thank you. And then we'll go to a lock on an update with the actual RFP.
Thank you, Daryl. First, let me see if I can share my screen. Can everyone see my screen, please? All right, so thank
Yes.
you. Thank you for the nods. Okay. So, morning, everyone. We wanted to spend some time together to update you on the status of our actuarial services. As you know, our contract with the Institute of Women's Policy and Research and partnered with Wildfig Partners expired last September. So we want to thank them for all their hard work and assistance in getting this program up and running. But statutorily, Section 3149 H5 requires the authority to put out an RFP every 3 years for professional services. Knowing this, the authority made 2 attempts posting an RFP last year, but no responses were received. This time, we posted it along with placing advertisements in the Hartford Business Journal and New Haven Biz, along with our social media platforms. The scope of work will shift from researching other paid leave entities around the country, preparing our program for monitoring the performance of the program now that it's in place. We will continue to receive a 5-year projection of the trust fund on an annual basis and ask to have periodic reporting of the trust fund performance by examining each quarterly contribution amounts coming in and a regular review of benefit payments being made. The cadence on the review of benefit payments is yet to be determined, as ideally we want to review them closely now as it begins to launch, but then as benefits begin to smooth out, that cadence may be stretched out a little further. The top of the section of private plans, that option will need to continue to be monitored as to what the impact of the private plans population has against the whole solvency of the fund. This is a timeline of the actuarial RFP. On February 8th, we issued the RFP and posted it to CT Source bid board. Questions were received from 3 firms that expressed interest last Friday. Answers were posted to these questions on Wednesday. And now we're at the point where proposals are due Monday, February 28th by 5 p.m. We plan on spending the rest of that week reviewing the proposals by the RFP review committee, where we'll conduct interviews the following week, March 7th to March 9th. Afterwards, the committee will get together for a scoring and review session. An invitation was sent out by email to all of the FAC committee. So as you can see, the committee comprises of Andrea, Aaron, Dave, and myself from the Paid Leave Authority. And from the board, we have representation from John Scott. So as this process has not begun yet, if anybody would like to volunteer and join, please reach out to me and let me know, and we'll be gladly to include anyone that would like to participate. After the RFP review has happened, we have to present our recommendations to FAC and the board, where negotiations will begin to start work June 1st. This is important work that we do need contracted, and this is this timeline, or I'm sorry, this is the update that we have for actual RFP. Does anyone have any questions on the RFP itself or the timeline? Okay.
Thank you, Locke. Next on our agenda is the fund recovery. We'll go to Locke and Walter.
All right. Let's see. Okay. Does everyone see my screen for fund recovery?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Okay. All right, so in December, we first introduced our fund recovery efforts. We all knew that it was going to be a need out there. There would be some level of monitoring and compliance of the contributions coming in. Last month in January, Michael Cesar from our legal counsel presented refinement of our policies surrounding compliance that was both fair to the employer and administratable by the Connecticut Paid Leave. So today, Walter and I, Walter is our contribution and compliance manager. We'd like to provide you an update on the fund recovery process. So first off, refinement of the policies as gone over by Michael Cesar last month, that put us in a place where we now have a better picture of what the employers might expect to see if they find themselves on the non-compliant side of contribution reporting. This timeline here shows that It emphasizes that the due date of each quarter's contributions is due at the quarter end, and that's the starting point for when interest begins to be assessed. It's not accrued, but rather it's assessed at a rate of 1% per month. So by saying it's not accrued, that means the amount is not compounding, but just the same amount month after month. The grace period is the last business day of the following month, and that's where that hard line kicks off as to slotting contributions in as compliant, on time, or non-compliant. Also, for penalties, after the refinement of the policies, for penalties, we have adopted a DOL approach where a penalty is assessed as soon as the grace period is over to encourage employers to report on their own before we start estimating invoices. An estimated invoice is communicated to the employer for 2 months. The amount will be transferred then over to a third-party collection vendor to allow them to do what they're good at and what they're fully equipped to do, as the Connecticut Paid Leave Authority was not designed to be a collection agency. From there, they'll have continued efforts for 1 year. We anticipated collection efforts for 1 year, where they'll have different sorts of outreach to collect the contributions due to the Paid Leave Authority. Before I hand it over to Walter, does anybody have questions on our timeline here? I don't see any questions,
No.
so.
I don't have a question on the timeline. It's just going to a third party for recovery. You know, that is, you know, do we have are we thinking about entering into a contract with a third party? Do we know the cost? In other words, you know, do you get 10% of what's owed, or what is the cost with a third party? I'm just trying to understand.
So we initially looked at the existing state contracts for this type of service with DRS and DOL. I'm not DRS specifically. Looking at the state existing contract, the rate that the vendor currently charges is 10% on all amounts collected.
Okay.
That is our starting point. We have yet to engage in any vendor specifically yet, but traditionally this is the normal path that a quasi-agent would go.
Okay. I'm asking in the spirit of, I don't know if the authority has the same responsibility access as a government agency. Is there an option to review and go to Superior Court and have the recovery served by state marshal and have the cost of such recovery placed on the employer and paying the marshal and working with the marshal for such recovery? In other words, there'd be no cost to the authority.
No, our statute doesn't speak to that, and Aaron and I haven't really found any other language in any other statute that would allow us to extend what you just described to a quasi-governmental agency.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Daryl, for those questions. So moving on from the timeline, I wanted to shoot it over to Walter.
Hello, thank you, Locke, and good morning, everyone. So here we will go over some statistics, some quantitative numbers of employers that are currently registered in our system that have not remitted any contribution payments, those that have partially paid their contributions due to us, as well as our outreach efforts. So currently in our system, we have 5,581 employers that have been registered by a batch TPA that haven't remitted any payments in our system. We also have an additional 2,674 employers who have registered themselves or been registered by a third party in our portal that have also not remitted any contributions to us. The next portion of the slide shows the trends of non-payment intervals or reporting periods that have either been skipped or partially paid by an employer or TPA. Within this volume of registrants, however, we're continuing to sift through the data and work with employers to help identify the following scenarios: possibly self-made reporting paid errors in that reporting period could be made, and possible whole quarters where itself skipped. So from here, we can see in Q2, we had 561 reporting periods or missed intervals. Q3 had 429. And then in Q4, we had 160. And from here, we do see a trend down considerably from Q2 through Q4. Those intervals are much less. And we are continuing to follow up with our TPAs and employers themselves to get that down to as close to zero as possible. So next, I'll talk about our outreach efforts in clearing up these non-payment, non-compliance issues. A large portion of our initial outreach has been built around just contacting the TPAs directly. This has been done by the CTPL staff and through our United Way Contact Center. We're reaching out to those TPAs, submitting to them batch reports that reflect all of the registered employers that have either haven't submitted contributions that TPA represents, providing reports reflecting underpayments of contributions, providing breaking down the reports from returns that have either been submitted that don't have any payments, or in those unique scenarios, we also have payments without a corresponding return in our system. Through this outreach, we've identified the following scenarios: additional contributions due to us. We're working on those TPAs to get those funds, get them processed in our system before we go into working with a possible third party and pursuing collection efforts. We are identifying registration and enrollment file issues that we're working with the TPA to coach them through this process so that they can fully represent their employers. And we have the correct information on who to go to when following up on a employer's account. And then we are working on return and payment filing errors where inconsistent information is being submitted on both files, resulting in non-matching of a payment and an invoice in the system. We have also followed up on payment failures, where we are reaching out to the employer directly for each payment that fails in our system to walk them through making that replacement payment to us. In the next few weeks, we'll start to utilize bulk email capability to follow up individually with those employers that we have an email address on file, so that we can follow up on those missed payments, those non-payments. We can work to help correct any registration error that exists in the system. And also we can use our DAS mailer print shop capabilities to focus outreach on those clients that we don't have an email address, so that we can push to further get those registrations updated in the system. And that would speak to our next steps of pursuing our contribution and compliance in collections, where we hope to reach out to that employer directly via email to expedite that collection process. That concludes my review of the statistics and outreach efforts. Does anyone have any questions?
Yes, for the 8,200 or so registered with no payments, it's excluded from the non-compliant on partial payments, correct?
Correct.
So
These are accounts that have no payment at all, and the payment intervals are people that have gone in and processed at least one payment or multiple payments.
Okay, so is it safe to assume the 8,200 plus with no payments potentially are non-compliant? We just haven't made that determination. In other words, they have employees, they have collections, but they didn't submit them to the authority.
Currently, it looks like non-compliant, but within that data, we are identifying trends and following upon unique scenarios where that employer was registered in our system in Connecticut, but actually has no Connecticut employees. So we're actually working on validating these numbers with our DOL data that we just recently got access to validate who actually is non-compliant. So we're working on that reporting to follow up before we pursue any additional collections, but we are working to try to update that registration information just to not have them be open and reflecting that contributions are due in our system.
Okay. And lastly, I'll just offer experience on this one for more for the employers that registered online. Just caution on when you get an application from an employee that is associated with the employer who has not provided any contributions or partials. It's possible it could be a fraud scheme. And I just want to bring that to your attention that that's potential. Sometimes that's why you have an employer registration without any monies coming in, is they're preparing to attempt to fraud the program.
Thank you for that advice. Yeah.
That's excellent input, Daryl. So thank you. Does anybody else have comments, observations, or questions around fund recovery?
Well, just following up on Daryl's point, I assume no claims have been filed for those 88,000 or so who are registered with no payments. Is that correct?
No, that wouldn't be a correct assumption, because don't forget, there's not a contribution requirement under the statute. For benefits eligibility, right? Benefits eligibility is meeting the 2325 in the highest earning quarter, working for a Connecticut employer and having a qualified reason for leave. So as long as the employee who's applying for leave meets those three criteria, there isn't a reason for us to deny them the benefit. What AFLAC is doing for us, however, is they're keeping track of people who apply, whose employers are not registered. So that way we're circling back to saying, okay, wait a minute. You may have DOL data. Your employer may very well be a legitimate employer, meaning that they probably have a few quarters of DOL data and they're established and they have a legitimate FEIN number, but they've not made any contributions on your behalf. And that's part of what's in that number that you see. And then we have some that are making, just don't want to lose my train of thought here, because there's so many different combinations. Then we do have people whose employers have made contributions, but we haven't yet seen employees from their work site make a claim yet, but we're sure they're coming. But we in the beginning, we already asked AFLAC, let us know when you have an employee who applies, who otherwise meets the criteria, who isn't registered. And then that other category that we're looking for, which is you've registered and not paid anything, that's what Locke and Walter are looking at. But we can't deny a benefit if they otherwise meet the benefit criteria.
Have they provided some information where employees have made claims where their employers have not made payments?
They have. They started to, and then I think when they had issues with the number of COVID claims that have come in, that's not something that they've had a specific focus on right now. But we're asking them, once they get over that hump, to refocus on that. They're still keeping track of that. So we'll continue to have to encourage them to do that, because what we've really been encouraging them to do is to make decisions as accurately and quickly as possible on the outstanding claims for the employee's own health condition, because there's almost 9,500 of those. So it's really trying to make sure that they move through those. But as they're doing that, they're keeping track of that for us.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So if there are any other questions, then that concludes our fund recovery update.
Thank you, Locke and Walter. Next is our update on claims administration with Andrea.
What I will essentially do is give you a verbal report, because I can't seem, I'm actually on PTO today. I'm in Foxwoods. I am judging a moot court competition for baby law students. So I don't have everything with me that I should. So I will I'll attempt to just give you a verbal update. So where we are now, we have about 19,000 claims that have come in. In the meantime, let me see if I can pull up something, but I wasn't able to find it earlier. AFLAC had been moving through these fairly slowly because of volume. And then in the last week or so, we've had an opportunity to have a more pointed discussion with them so that they could actually divide these claims into the different types of categories. So we could know what was in the COVID bucket and what was in some of the other buckets. But you know, Carol, here's what I'm going to do. If you don't mind circling back to me, I'm going to try one more time to try to find these slides that I've been looking for the last.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that way I can not just talk off the top of my head, but actually have.
Sure. The next topic is old business. Is there any old business to raise? All right, I'll talk very slow, Andrea. Is there any new business to raise?
Oh, let me see if I can get them in here.
Any new business?
None.
None? All right, I appreciate your patience while and also I don't have great Wi-Fi here either, which is also an issue. All right, I think I've found it. I appreciate it. Let me just make sure this is the one. Yeah, okay, got it, thank you. I think it was the magic of slowing down just a bit that was helpful. All right, let me go back and share my screen. All right, let me jump around a little bit. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
All right, thank you. This is what I was looking for. You can see that this is a slide that we actually ask AFLAC to provide us with this data every single week so we know where we are. So you can see that we've got over 3,500 claims for COVID, and we've got 6,900 claims for illness and injury. There's just an enormous number of claims in pregnancy and bonding and pregnancy and birth and bonding. So essentially have roughly the same number of claims, and then we have the family member claims as well. This is what it's looking at. Over here on this side, let me just, what everybody can see, you can see the spike, right about the beginning of January when the Omicron variant hit. You can see this huge spike in the COVID claims that were occurring, and then now you can see it really starting to trend downward. As of 19, which was last week, you can see that we're more in the range of where we thought we would be in terms of the claims. And then let me see if I can find the slide on the claims volume. Here we go. So you can see the slide on the claims volume. We are still getting enormous numbers of calls. They are all still being answered well within the time frame. You can see that the handle times and the hold times are well within the range that we set for them in terms of service levels. This green line here is the service level that's contractual. And you can see that the gray line is actually the percentage of calls that are being answered in 30 seconds over the last 4 weeks. Even with the enormous volume of calls that are coming in, we're still getting the level of call answering service that we've agreed to contractually. Many of these calls are not new. There are people calling back to determine the status of their claim. So what we've done is we've actually engaged in some messaging because of the sheer volume, not within our 5 window anymore. It's probably more like 10 to 15 days. And that's disconcerting for people because for some people, their leaves are starting without having a particular decision made. So those claims are actually being escalated so that those that are within that window where they're actually going to be out on leave, we're trying to get to those first, but it is an enormous amount of claims that we're trying to manage all at the same time. That is essentially a brief summary of where we are. I don't know if I can answer any. I'll stop sharing my screen and see if I can answer any other questions for you.
Andrea, of the 19,000 or so claims or applications, how many are actually approved and in pay status or paid status?
They have about 7,000 right now that are in either approved, or I shouldn't say approved, a decision has been made
Okay,
and in paid status, right? So some of those are a large number of those may be denied because of the volume of the COVID claims, because unless COVID rises to the level of the statutory definition of a serious health condition, we are denying those claims.
okay. And with the ones that are denied, I don't know the volume. I don't know if you know the volume, but I do know the appeals thus far to labor is extremely minimal.
Yeah, and that's true. And that's because we are really engaging, and I have to give a lot of credit to John Simonetti's team. They really are engaging day by day by day on any issues that have been escalated that need a review. So if, for example, a person gets a denial and they believe that that denial is improper, there's an internal review of that denial so that decision can either be affirmed or overturned at the AFLAC level or where we are, so that it doesn't have to go to the appeals process, which can take longer. So that's why you're really seeing a lower volume, that and in part, and because it's taking a little bit longer to get through all of those claims. So I think you've only seen 9 or 10 so far. It's about the number. It may have gone up a little bit.
I had a status last week. There was due to a question through approps, and there was 17 before the board labor, and 7 were dismissed primarily for lack of agreement. They either didn't file an application or it was pending, which was strange. And then 10 are actual pending with the appeals division.
Yeah. So we have people who, we believe that denial was proper because they either didn't work they weren't working for a Connecticut employer, they didn't have the requisite number of weeks or wages. There's all of those reasons, but
yeah,
that's why the appeals process exists, so that people can have an opportunity to be heard.
That's right.
Yeah.
Do you have a breakout of the 7,000? How many were approved or denied? Because it's interesting to me that we have such a small amount of appeals. If there was a couple thousand that were denied, I don't know.
I am looking through that slide right now to see if I can get that for you. I know that we ask for these things. Sometimes they're not always readily available.
Okay.
Let's see, but I think I almost have it. Let me see if I can get it for you. Okay. All right, I think this one. No, that's not it either. Okay, this one might actually be helpful. Okay. I don't know if this will answer your question exactly, but you can see we asked them for all kinds of data, first of all, and they do respond. So you can see here on the left side of the screen, you see the number of claims that were received in December and so on, and the numbers where the decisions were made based on the numbers that were submitted. And then you can see as soon as COVID hit, we have much larger buckets of pending versus decisions made. But along here is where, if you were to add all these numbers together, that's pretty much where you're seeing, along with the other blue numbers at the top, that's where we get to our number. But we can see we still are experiencing a pretty significant backlog with just the enormous numbers of claims that have come in through COVID primarily. So that's where we are, but that's how they're working through them. So, and I would say in the beginning of February, most of these in this January bucket there was a lot more orange, and we're working with them to continue to push that down so that it looks more like it does on the December side. We were able to make decisions on the December side because we had more information from people. Here, a lot of these claims that are pending, they're waiting for the medical certification, which a lot of people probably aren't going to be able to get because their doctors aren't going to see them, because doctors really aren't seeing people for COVID unless they're actually hospitalized. So we expect these numbers to start to drop considerably over time, but we'll get another report next week and I'll be able to bring that back to the committee then. But this is where we are right now.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Any questions with Andrea? Okay, we got through our old and new business. The last is the adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We had a third. Excellent. Everyone stay safe with the storm. Enjoy your weekend. Bye.
Okay, bye.